let's go back in time to the late 90s. Developers were constantly at each other's throats trying to create the new platformer Mascot, something that would rise above the rest, stand out. It would capture that magical spark that Nintendo established with their Jolly Red Plumber about a decade prior. But the Big N actually changed the whole playing field in 1996 with the release of a game that I think we're probably all familiar with.
Mario!
The Nintendo 64 was released, and with it came Super Mario 64. Game devs had dipped their toes into the realm of polygons and three-dimensional space before, but we had never seen anything quite like this. Full maneuverability in a 3D environment with the revolutionary introduction of an analog stick that would allow players to move around in any direction and control characters with precision people hadn't even thought possible back then. This game, and the system released with it, changed the entire industry, and the effects of what Nintendo introduced can still be seen rippling into the design of games even to this day. And, of course, every company in the race immediately got to work to keep up with this new design method. In the next few years, we saw countless games making the transition to 3D and plenty of characters popping up trying to establish some footing in this new technological environment. The 3D platformer pie that Super Mario 64 had brought to the table was delicious and everyone wanted a slice. Crash Bandicoot, Glover, Gex, Spyro, and many others entered the scene to establish themselves as the pioneers of 3D platformers, and many of those properties are remembered fondly even now. But there were a couple of developers in those days that wanted to blend the 3D environment with the classic two-dimensional gameplay to create something brand new. This is what we would call a 2.5D game, where the gameplay remains within the faithful side-scrolling control, but set within a three-dimensional environment. It could also refer to the use of 2D styles to emulate a three-dimensional environment where none really exists, but for today, well, let's just focus on that first definition. It's a style of game that we've definitely seen plenty of over the years in a lot of great games like Little Big Planet, Inside, or Mighty... Wait a minute, no, Mighty Number 9, get out of here, stop that, you're not a good game. Or Metroid 2 Samus Returns have used this style to create some truly unforgettable experiences, but one of the earliest adopters of this setup was Namco's adorable little game for the PS1 called Klonoa Door to Phantomile.
Klonoa is not the most popular character out there, he never has been, but I've been noticing him getting a little bit more attention in recent years as his cult following has been growing bit by bit, but there's still a lot of people out there who don't really know much about him or probably haven't even heard of him at all.
This strange dog, rabbit, cat, the hell is this thing? Is the creation of one Hideo Yoshizawa, the director of the original Ninja Gaiden games, who didn't like how little other developers were focusing on the stories in their games and wanted to create something a bit more cinematic and engaging. Originally, it was going to be a much more serious game about robots in the ruins of some ancient civilization, but was later reworked into something that could appeal to a wider audience. The design of Klonoa was eventually created by Yoshihiko Arai, and the tone of the final game started to take shape. For whatever reason, this game, and really the franchise as a whole, never really saw the traction I think it deserved. Maybe it was that the gameplay style didn't seem inventive enough at first glance to consumers who were just locked in on games like Super Mario 64 at the time. Or maybe it could have just been that it seems a little too childish for some consumers. I mean, the same thing basically happened to Wind Waker at first because a lot of people seemed to just brush off cartoony visuals and bright colors for some reason. Whatever the reason, Namco tried to revive the franchise after merging with Bandai by making a full-blown remake of Door to Phantomile for the Wii back in 2008, which was the last release in the series as of right now. I was thinking of trying to tackle the Wii remake in its own video,
Or the Wii make, as I like to call it, because I'm stupid.
but I ultimately decided to just take them both on in this one review because there's really only so many differences to discuss. I'll have to talk about the presentation of the game before the gameplay this time for plot-specific reasons, but I'll let you know where to skip to avoid spoilers.
With that out of the way, let's stop wasting time and take a look at one of the overlooked classics of the PS1 era. This is Klonoa Door to Phantomile, and its remake, Klonoa, on the Wii. At least a little bit, but we'll get to that.
Welcome to the land of Phantomile, home to a small creature named Klonoa as he explores the forest near his home and stumbles across a mysterious ring. After trying to pull the thing out of the ground, he finds that it's inhabited by a wind spirit named Hupo, and they just immediately become friends right there on the spot.
You became friends with Yosuke. Yosuke will now die for you.
Well, the two hit it off, and we see them running around in the fields, playing and having fun together.
Ah, it's all so cute and happy. You know what this really needs?
Armageddon.
yeah, Klonoa wakes up and realizes it was just a dream, but some part of it seemed to be based in truth as we see Hupo there with him in the morning. Apparently, these two actually do have a bit of history together and have been friends for quite some time. Hupo is the ring spirit that lives inside Klonoa's magical ring that he uses to attack, essentially making Hupo part of our main character's moveset. Klonoa's dream seems somewhat prophetic though, as the vessel that crashed in his nightmare does so in real life, and Klonoa and Hupo set off to check it out. As they travel though, they notice that these nightmare creatures are popping up all over the place and even trapping the inhabitants of the village within these little nightmare bubbles as well. Along the way, the duo runs into a brutish old fart called Baloo, who's building a not at all creepy monument trying to reach Laphise, a diva from the Moon Kingdom that sings something called the Song of Rebirth. We don't get much info on what that is just yet, but jot that down because it's going to be important later. After parting ways with Baloo, Klonoa makes his way past the Grand Windmill overlooking his home and through a cave system until they make it to the crash site, only to find that they were not the first ones there, as a mysterious being known as Gadius and his dopey henchman Joka have already arrived, and it turns out the person flying the craft that hit the bell tower with oh so much grace was none other than Laphise herself. Gadius takes notice of Klonoa, but doesn't really think much of him, simply ordering Joka to take care of the intruders and whisks the young girl off to places unknown. Joka summons a monster to attack our heroes, and after a brief fight, the clownish goofball panics and runs away. Klonoa and Hupo discover a small moon-shaped pendant left behind by Laphise and decide to ask Klonoa's grandfather about everything that's happened, who tells them that the charm they found is a crest of the Moon Kingdom, and that this Gadius character is a threat they should definitely take seriously. He tells Klonoa and Hupo to let the leader of the Forest Kingdom know about what's going on, and our heroes set off on their journey properly. So far, we have a pretty decent setup here. The characters have all been likable enough, there's enough details to ensure the player knows what's going on in the immediate scenario, but there's enough pieces of the puzzle missing to create a compelling mystery. The goal is simple, but lends a certain level of scale, as the Moon Kingdom being discussed here is said to be one of old legends and may not even be real. But the implications of Gadius taking Laphise away and saying that he won't let her save the world with her Song of Rebirth informs us that whatever he has planned is not only of ill intent, but could affect the whole world that we've been introduced to. It's a strong setup to a lighthearted adventure, but Klonoa's nightmare from the beginning left the seeds of a darker undertone that may spread through the rest of the adventure. I'd say that the opening of the story strikes a pleasing balance of fun antics with a lingering dark mystery, and it's really just something you didn't see in a lot of platformers back then. Solid introduction here. The adventure continues as Klonoa and Hupo try to make their way through Forlock Forest, but they find it in disarray, as the nearby Water Kingdom's king has been overcome by some kind of magic spell, and in turn, his new evil ways have affected the neighboring kingdoms as the water from Jugpot hasn't been making it to the rest of the world. In fact, the flow of water has been completely reversed, with waterfalls even pouring upward to the sky itself. The two encounter a small water dragon thing.
I love the designs in this game, I really do, but what even are half these things?
This is Carol, who cries for the help of our two heroes, saying that her mother Pamela has been turned evil as well as the king, so our boys set off to confront King Seedoff, who attacks them alongside a corrupted Pamela. After knocking some sense into them, it's revealed that Joka was the one behind the spell that manipulated Seedoff and Pamela, and he's very easily disposed of. Seedoff reaffirms that Granny, the Queen of Forlock, is sort of the local expert on the legends of this world, and that Gadius likely controlled him so that they could kill off Forlock Forest by taking away its water. Seedoff restores the natural water flow, and Carol rushes Klonoa off to Forlock, where he and Hupo make their way through the forest as we see it reviving itself all around us. It's a great way to visually convey not only the effect of Jugpot's importance to this place, but also as an indicator of our progress as we help restore everything to the way it should be. Excellent visual storytelling. Our heroes also run into Joka again, who is still hard at work making a fool out of himself, solidifying his role as the useless henchman character. He is still able to make it to Granny before us though, and is trying to pry some kind of information about the Moon Kingdom out of her. She stays quiet long enough for Klonoa to show up, and Joka resorts to summoning another monster to fight, which Klonoa makes very short work of. Joka cowers away again, and Granny explains to Klonoa and Hupo that the crest they found is a key to the Moon Kingdom itself, and that by traveling to the Sun Kingdom floating in the sky, they can open the way to the sacred place and bring it out of hiding. Klonoa remarks that they left the moon pendant with Grandpa, and that's when Joka turns back up. It turns out he actually didn't go very far and was listening in the whole time. Now knowing everything he needs to, do and flies off to take the pendant from Grandpa. Klonoa and Hupo set off in a desperate rush through a shortcut found in a set of old ruins to reach Grandpa first. After making it out of the ruins, Klonoa waves to his grandfather, and it seems like they've made it in just the nick of time before Joka makes his reappearance.
The setup so far has created a very cute and welcoming atmosphere. It's a very innocent and inviting world, something that you would see in a child's bedtime story or a Saturday morning cartoon. It's also worth pointing out that Joka has been built up as this really useless character. He's a scaredy cat, so he runs away at the first sign of danger. But this is the part where everything changes.
Joka uses his airship to charge up a laser that he blasts down onto Grandpa's home, destroying the building and using a tractor beam to retrieve the pendant. Klonoa rushes in to see if his grandpa's okay, but another one of Joka's monsters appears and our hero is forced to fight it off while the little villain takes off with the crest. Klonoa is of course able to take down the creature, but by the time he makes it to his grandfather, it's already too late. We're met with a surprisingly somber scene as Klonoa lays next to his dying grandfather, who gives the child some touching final words, reassuring him of his strength and destiny. Grandpa tells Klonoa that he must get the pendant back before Ghadius is able to summon the Moon Kingdom, and with that, he takes one last breath before succumbing to his injuries, and his life ends. In such a short amount of time, the tone of the whole game seems to have shifted. What started out so joyful and calming just delivered a legitimately sad character death and probably one of the most heart-wrenching cries of pain I've ever heard. Klonoa's sudden shriek kind of hurts to hear, and it seals this as a very effective moment. The rush through the ruins helped create a sense of danger, but I'm sure that most players assumed that we'd make it in time to save Grandpa, or at least that he'd make it out alive, but the game isn't interested in pulling punches for the sake of maintaining a childlike atmosphere, and this death right here is one of the things that makes this game stand out to me the most. But believe me, this won't be the last thing the game does to shred the veil of childlike wonder. Klonoa is distraught and heartbroken, but the situation is still pretty dire, and if anything, that's only more apparent now. Pamela arrives because, alright, okay, cool, yeah, she can fly now. Let's just not question that, let's move on. She takes Klonoa and Hupo up to the Temple of the Sun, and our little hero gets a sudden burst of determination, seeing Grandpa's death not as a reason to grieve, at least for now, but as a reason to act. A couple of inhabitants of the temple greet Klonoa and Hupo upon their arrival and inform them that the way to the altar has been locked away by monsters led by Ghadius, and Klonoa fights his way through the enemies to open the way inside. Once there, however, the High Priest tells Klonoa that Ghadius has already opened the gate to the Moon Kingdom and that time is running out. The entire world of Phantomile is constructed from the dream energy gathered by the Moon Kingdom, and if Ghadius enters it, he'll be able to alter the energy into nightmares, filling the land with nothing but darkness and despair. Because the gate has been opened and the transition has already begun, the entire next level, or I'm sorry, vision as it's called in these games, that will make sense later, trust me, is filled with enemies that are constantly changing shape. When the sun is eclipsed, they become invincible, but vulnerable when the light pushes through. This is another great example of how the game uses level design to directly reflect the events of the story, and it's probably one of my favorite ideas in the game, especially since you would think that you can only progress when the sun is shining, but actually, there are certain platforms that only become available when it's eclipsed, forcing the players to make the best out of both conditions the level is under. Klonoa and Hupo finally make it to the top of the altar where Ghadius and Joka are waiting for them. When asked why he's doing all of this, he responds by claiming that it's all nothing more than revenge, as the dreams of the people of Phantomile somehow imprisoned him in darkness, so now he's trying to flood the land with the nightmares that he's been forced to live among for so many years. He fades away as the temple shifts into motion and Joka uses the last trick up his sleeve, himself. Once Joka is defeated, he leaves our heroes with one final threat of the future they face before dying. The temple's process is complete, absorbing energy from the kingdoms of Phantomile below as the Moon Kingdom appears. Rising into the sky as our heroes gaze at it and oh geez, look at those teeth. Ah, man, Klonoa's just headed up to here with his entire day. Pamela arrives and ferries them up to the Moon Kingdom, the last destination of our quest, and while Klonoa seems as determined as ever to move forward and finish the job, Hupo seems like he's hiding something. After making their way through the first half of the Moon's Labyrinth, the duo encounters the citizens of the legendary kingdom who start to refer to Hupo as their prince. The queen appears and everything's laid out on the table. Hupo isn't quite who he said he was this whole time. He's apparently A stupid looking Duplo toy. Okay, yeah, sorry to ruin the moment. It's a great reveal, yada yada yada, but I can't get over how dumb I think he looks in this form. Like seriously, he just looks like an off-brand Lego man. Never mind, I'm getting off topic here. Hupo tells Klonoa who he really is. Not the ring spirit, but rather the Prince of the Moon Kingdom Cress. He had to find a way to enter the dream world of Phantomile to save his own kingdom, and well, Klonoa was the best chance they had. So alright, let's check things off here. Klonoa had his grandpa die, his efforts failing at every turn, the weight of the entire world thrust on his shoulders, and now he's being told that his best friend was really just using him as a tool to save his kingdom this entire time. Hupo seems legitimately remorseful about deceiving and using Klonoa like that, but it's still a betrayal of trust and a hell of a lot to lay on this guy all at once. Even still, Klonoa smiles, brushes it off, and agrees to help. Of course he's still gonna help out no matter what. At the end of the day, it's the right thing to do, and besides, he and Hupo have been friends forever, right?
Yeah, let's just put a pin in that one.
Klonoa excitedly gets ready to finish this off once and for all, and he and his buddy head out one last time to reach the top and take on Gaudius. This final vision is so fantastic, from the music to the visuals to the puzzles and the overwhelming feeling of finality. I think it really speaks to the strength of Klonoa's character that even after everything that's happened and all that's been revealed, he's in this to the end and he isn't willing to slow down even for 1 second. Everything about this final vision reflects that, and no matter how many times I play this game, this last area hits me with that strong feeling of urgency without fail. It is absolutely flawless. Klonoa finally makes it up to Gaudius as he's preparing to awaken Nahatum, a creature of pure nightmares, but he's troubled by the presence of some kind of dream. He decides that in order for Nahatum to be complete, this mysterious dream that can't be corrupted must be eliminated. Klonoa calls him out on the insanity of his plan. After all, if Nahatum destroys Phantomile and the Moon Kingdom, Gaudius will be erased too, but I guess he doesn't really care. Gaudius is a creature that hails from nightmares, one that wanted to live in harmony with the other beings of Phantomile, but people only want pleasant dreams. They've shut out nightmares and buried them away, causing Gaudius to be trapped alone in darkness for countless years. It doesn't matter to him if he dies, he wants to treat the world the same way it treated him, as something to be hated and discarded, fallen victim to the darkness, which is actually not a bad motivation for him. On some level, I can't help but empathize for the guy. After being cast aside and left alone by people who wanted nothing to do with him, I guess it kinda makes sense that he would want to respond in kind. Still doesn't make it okay, of course, so Klonoa takes him on in a fight, and I do not recommend taking this boss after drinking. Just look at all those moving layers and colors. I haven't had alcohol in months and I still want to barf. Gaudius is defeated, and the people Klonoa's helped throughout his journey come to congratulate him on his victory. Everyone seems in a very celebratory mood until Gaudius chimes in to let them know they're all still too late. He's already used Laphis as a catalyst to send all his nightmare energy through a prism that creates Nahatum, and our team bands together to take him out. The Queen of Crest gives everyone a special cannon that Klonoa helps fill up with monsters to fire at the creature, and it's a pretty great 3-phase fight, but oh god, ew. Oh, Nahatum, stop that. Nobody wants to see that, come on. Once they have the big beastie staggered, Hupo tells Klonoa that he needs to use the ring to fire him directly at Nahatum, hoping that the wind bullet will be enough to take him out for good. It looks like Hupo made a heroic sacrifice at first, but luckily he was able to survive being turned into ammunition. Laphis is restored, Hupo and Klonoa are reunited, and the fight is finally over. We see our heroes resting on a cliffside in their hometown, waiting for Laphis to sing her song of rebirth to restore Phantomile to the way it's meant to be. All's well that ends well, right? Klonoa goes on about their victory, excited to see the world restored and asking his friend if they can still have fun together after he returns to his duties as a prince, but Hupo has one last truth to unveil. Klonoa isn't from here. He's not from the Wind Village, he's not from the Moon Kingdom, he's not even from Phantomile at all. He was brought out of his own world into Phantomile by Hupo so he could save them. The dreams Klonoa had that started this journey, the memories he has of growing up with his best friend, maybe even growing up with his grandpa, they're all fake. Klonoa is a dream traveler, a being that can go to the worlds made of dreams to restore them. Hupo was able to bring him into Phantomile and plant memories in his head that would make him think this world was his own, making it easier to convince him to save it. But now that balance has been restored, Laphis's song will reset everything to the way it's supposed to be, which means Klonoa himself will be torn from this reality. Klonoa screams out in protest. Fake memories or not, he and Hupo are friends, even if it was just for this adventure and he wants to stay, but it just isn't possible. Laphis approaches the balcony balcony of the Moon Kingdom, singing the song of rebirth to reset everything. A rift is opened, and as it tries to rip Klonoa out of Phantomile, he tries to resist, causing Hupo to try too, knowing it's useless to keep his friend in this world. This sequence is gorgeous. The amount of emotion pouring from these two friends as they desperately try to hold on to one another is honestly kind of heartbreaking. But I'm not even sure that the point of this scene is even just how sad it is. I don't think it's just about how tragic the circumstances are, I think it's about these friends just trying to hang on. Even knowing that what's been set in motion can't be stopped, they reach out for each other anyway. As Klonoa rockets off to another reality, Phantomile is restored. Life pours back over the land, and Hupo looks up to the distance where he knows Klonoa is off to experience life without him. But he smiles. Maybe it's because he was so overcome with the guilt he felt for manipulating Klonoa the way he did and feeling some wave of relief knowing that he still considers Hupo a friend. Maybe it was because he knew Klonoa was off to find new worlds and to have new amazing journeys in, or maybe it was just in remembering the time they'd spent together. Whatever the reason, that little smile is the perfect send-off to this tale as the scene turns into pages, and this little story comes to a close. I wasn't expecting this kind of story from something like Klonoa. On the surface, it's just a cutesy little game about a cartoon rabbit having adventures in a dream world, but what I got was a shockingly effective story about death, loss, responsibility, the consequences of neglect, sorrow, happiness, determination, and friendship. Look, I know all of this sounds super cheesy right now, I get it, but I really can't commend the team who worked on this enough for how well done this is, especially for a little Mascot platformer, and especially in a time period where nobody was looking for a meaningful story in that kind of game. Without a doubt, this is a narrative that is best enjoyed from experiencing it. Even if you know how the plot goes, I still don't think you'll get the full impact of it unless you play it for yourself and see it as the sum of its parts. The gameplay, visuals, sound, and writing all play a part in how good the story of Klonoa is, and I simply can't recommend it enough. There are certain things I've left out, like small interactions with NPC characters and things of that nature, but I wanted to be sure to cover the main stuff. It's a great story and I think it can be enjoyed by all ages, and I hope the presentation of the game isn't enough for you to write it off, because you just might be surprised by the depth lingering beneath the surface of this beautiful little game. Like I said before, the quality of this title isn't just made up of the story, but it's a sum of all of its parts. But I also think this is the best time to bring up the Wii version of the game, as it's consistent with the PS1 original in terms of gameplay and plot, but the presentation is where you're gonna see the big differences. I'm keeping this in the spoiler section though, as a lot of bigger failings I think the remake has are in the ways it fails to deliver on some of the key narrative moments, though I will have some gameplay comparisons to draw from as well. The original game had a really fun idea going for it in that it plays like most 2.5D games out there, but it takes advantage of working with a 3D plane by letting areas wrap around, curve, and add a dynamic quality that you don't see in simple left-to-right ventures. Kinda reminds me of Nights into Dreams. I hear a lot of Klonoa fans also bring up this series, and I haven't really gotten a chance to play it yet, but who knows, maybe one day. It helps keep things visually interesting, and the game even takes a few moments to use 3D to make Klonoa move forward as well, adding to the depth. In terms of graphics, there's some obvious comparisons to make between the PS1 and Wii versions. Door to Phantomile uses 3D models for the environments and structures, but the characters and enemies are all portrayed through 2D sprites that resemble the techniques used for Donkey Kong Country. I can't say for sure why this decision was made, but it adds an endearing quality to the PS1 original that I think was worth capturing. The sprites are super cute and pretty expressive, adding to Klonoa's charm. The obvious drawback is how dated it can look at times though. The sprites are super pixelated, and there's a bit of clash between the characters and the environments they inhabit, but maybe that's why it was done this way. If nothing else, the visual style does help the characters stand out from the backgrounds and makes them easier to see, but it still feels odd in places, especially when certain enemies are sized up versions of smaller sprites. That's where things really start to look a little jarring. The Wii version elected to keep things consistent, and everything is a 3D model. Klonoa has been redesigned to resemble his older look from the later games, and I do miss how adorable his younger model is, but it still blends in well with the world very well. The levels themselves look great, and in terms of overall design and looks, it's easy to say that the remake has a bit of a leg up over the original. Not across the board though, sadly. I think the Wii version definitely missed the mark when it came to certain character models. I think Klonoa himself looks fine, even though I do still want my precious baby boy back, but his expressiveness really took a hit. One of the huge benefits of the original game was seeing Klonoa's face emote and liven up, but the Wii version of Klonoa has barely any expression at all at most times. There are exceptions where he'll seem shocked or excited, but for the most part, that blank face of his remains a ecstatic stare into the void of nothingness he feels trapped in. Other character models are even worse off though, with the biggest victim being Laphise herself. In Door to Phantomile, she's kept simple and geometric, the basic shapes of her model lending to a nice and cute design, but just look at what the Wii version did to her.
Look at it! Look at it! I want all of you to look at it!
Yeah, not quite as nice, is it? I'm really not so sure what they were going for here, but it looks like they were going for more realistic proportions or something, and it just does not work for me. Yeah, no thanks, pass. The cutscenes don't fare much better here, sadly. The remake portrays every event in the same way, with characters just kind of appearing in the levels with dialogue boxes popping up when they speak, which works well for the most part, but it loses a bit of the power some of the more serious scenes are supposed to have. In the PlayStation version, they went the FMV route, same as a lot of other games in those days, and yeah, this is dated, but one of the best things we get from the FMVs though is lighting and tone. The PS1 version's cutscenes just have better visuals and direction. The use of bloom is sparing, but it adds that dreamlike quality that's so important in capturing the nature of Phantomile. Just look at these two scenes side by side. Door to Phantomile feels like it's set in some kind of fantastic, far-off land, but the remake is just like, yep, here's your everyday cat rabbit just waltzing around in a totally normal forest from literally anywhere. Or how about when the Moon Kingdom is summoned? The Wii version has nothing on Door to Phantomile here. The colors, lighting, and effects are all blended together brilliantly, making for a really engaging, intimidating visual, perfectly encapsulating how the characters are perceiving this chaotic yet awesome event. And then there's the Wii version.
No contest!
And weirdly enough, I feel like the PS1 original has some graphical effects that outshine the Wii version as well. A glaring example is in the first vision of the Moon Kingdom when you're running across this area in some sort of hub. In the original version, there's a little particle effect used here to follow Klonoa's footsteps and spread this kind of stardust behind him, creating a gentle sensation of an otherworldly wonder. In the Wii version though, nothing like that happens. That effect is just completely absent. I would have expected the remake to double down on the dreamlike elements of Phantomile and take advantage of what the more advanced hardware could pull off, but it really just feels like so much of Phantomile is missing here, and that just sucks, dude. The one consistent element would be in the sound department. Well, sort of. The same music is used for both versions, and it sounds absolutely outstanding. There's such a great variety of styles and tunes used here that help elevate every moment into something a bit more. It captures the innocent charm of the places you visit, creates a sense of awe for some of the more fantastical ideas, elicits a tone of dread when things get dark, and pulls at your heartstrings when the time calls for it. It's one of my favorite soundtracks from this era of games, and it's easily one of my favorite parts of this whole experience. I wish I knew who exactly to credit for this OST, but it was actually made by like 9 people. I'll list all their names here so I don't destroy the pronunciation of all their names at once. That being said, the PS1 version does have a kind of irritating problem in that the songs don't actually loop properly. They just sort of fade out and then start all over again, and it's kind of distracting at times. From what I could remember, the Wii version does fix that element though, so hey, points to the Wii version? Other than that, if you're looking at differences between the two versions in terms of sound, it would be in the voice department. There was a completely fictional language created for the game that the characters speak in, lending to its setting as a world beyond our own, and also helping to maintain a language barrier so that it's more difficult to pick out flaws in the voice department. Even with that though, you can hear how well the voice actors find a way to emote with these completely made up words, and the tone of what's being said can be felt without even understanding what they're saying. It's seamless, and this decision works wonders.
Which is why I struggle to understand in what world somebody thought it would be a good idea to give these characters English voices for the Wii version.
But there's one dream I remember very clearly, as if it was happening right now.
I'm not dwelling on this, and I'm not beating around the bush. It sucks. I hate listening to it, I don't like it, and I want it to stop. Thankfully, some merciful soul at Namco had the wisdom to add an option to the game that allows you to change all of the speech back to the language of Phantomile, and thank God. I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating here, but honestly, if the English voice acting was the only option for the game, it might have been enough for me to write off this entire version of the game altogether. I really, really think it's that ear grating. It still comes close to that though, to be honest, because the last comparison I want to make between the presentation of these two versions of the game is with the ending. Basically, all the magic is gone here. The mood is completely shot and nothing about this scene has the same impact as the version that came out over a decade and 2 systems prior. If they weren't using the same exact music as the original, I feel like they probably would have messed that up too. They didn't even give Hupo his smile. They took away everything about this ending that was sweet and just left it bitter. Wow, couldn't even get that transition to the credits down. What gives, guys? In some ways, yes. I would say that the 2008 version of Klonoa has improved the overall aesthetic over its retro predecessor in some obvious ways. It's outputting in a consistent frame rate, the models and textures all look great, the environments have been given some really pretty upgrades, but at the end of the day, there's just something about the way the original game looks that I can't help but think is far and away superior to the remake. Some elements of it don't hold up, you're not gonna hear me argue otherwise, but the overall trade-off seems to be in the favor of the original, as I think it has a better sense of tone, atmosphere, and maintains a stronger emphasis on the dreamlike aspect of the game's setting. It's such a shame too, because the Wii version had such a great opportunity to play around with the elements already present and do something new and exciting with them. Speaking of playing though, while a few things have changed in the series over the years, the fundamental game design remains the same. Klonoa is a puzzle platformer, in which our main character uses the enemies in each given environment as a means to progress through each vision. The game keeps things simple too, no complex combos, button mashing, controller waving, or any of that crap. Well, I guess depending on which way you're playing the Wii version. Please don't use the motion controls, it's not worth it. 2 buttons and a D-pad, that's all you need. Each vision in the game is set up to put obstacles in Klonoa's path that he must use his abilities to overcome. This can include jumping, holding the jump button to hover over gaps and obstacles for a few moments, or the main ability of the game, inflating. Klonoa's ring is powered with Hupo as the wind spirit, meaning he's got a certain level of control over air or wind or something. So he uses this power to run up to enemies and pump them full of air. If you're anything like me, the first thing that comes to mind is probably Dig Dug, where you inflate enemies on screen until they explode horrifically in front of your cold, dead, uncaring eyes.
Well, wait, both franchises did come from the same company, so what's going on over there, Namco? Explain yourselves.
Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, alright? I learned it by watching you.
So when Klonoa has an inflated enemy, he can use it to propel himself upward, acting as a double jump. The enemy is sent flying downward too, so it can double up as an attack as well. He can hurl inflated enemies at others, throw them into the foreground or background at enemies or switches, use them as platforms, or even chain them together to allow you to make it over long stretches of terrain. The puzzles in the game will often require you to figure out which order to activate certain switches in, or how to properly utilize the number of enemies around you to progress. A handy element of the game's design is that whenever you use up all the available enemies, another one will hop back into the scene, ensuring that you're never left without a way to move forward. I like the way the game handles platforming as a way to tease your brain a bit, forcing you to consider your ability to move forward as a limited resource that makes you think over how you can get the most out of it. This is expanded upon when you take in the additional elements of each stage, those being the gems and Phantomilians. Every vision has 150 gems to collect, with some being inside larger enemies, inside these eggs in out-of-reach places, or requiring you to take advantage of these mirror spirits that double the value of every gem. The mirror spirit only sticks around for a short time though, so you have to know how to perfectly collect every gem in the immediate area before the spirit disappears if you want to collect all of the gems in each vision. That is, if you even want to bother. As is tradition in platformers, collecting 100 of these gems will grant you an extra life, but collecting every gem in every level is not necessary. There's a map screen that will allow you to see the progress of your collection, with a green gem meaning that you've gotten 100 gems in that vision, and a blue gem meaning that you've collected all 150. So what's the reward for going through and figuring out how to expertly collect every single gem floating around in this cutesy hellscape? Absolutely nothing. Yeah, there's nothing to show for it other than this complete level select screen, which I guess looks nice, and if you're a completionist, it's at least easy to keep track of, but what's the incentive here? Thankfully, that's not the case for the inhabitants of Phantomile. Every vision has 6 of these little guys trapped in a little bubble like this, or sometimes in those eggs scattered all over the place. Not sure where all those eggs came from in the first place though. This cute little HUD in the original, or this indicator in the remake, will show a little puzzle being put together as you rescue more and more of these guys, and after every stage, the inhabitants that you've rescued will play you a part of a song. By collecting every Phantomile in every stage, you'll progressively hear this thankful little tune become more and more complete until you can see it perform to its fullest extent. That's adorable, and probably one of the most charming ways I've seen progression treated, but it doesn't stop there. If you collect every trapped inhabitant of Phantomile, you unlock a secret stage that will really test your knowledge of this game's mechanics as you race to reach the top of Baloo's tower. Complete this stage and you'll unlock a sound test that will allow you to play the music of the game, which in those days was a really nice treat, especially with a soundtrack like this. There's also a timer to show how long it's taking you to beat the level, and I think this is the best time I've managed to get so far. I'm curious to see if any of you have cool records to share. The Wii version has some extra modes to share as well, but it's really nothing too fancy. There's a reverse mode, letting you play all the visions in the reverse direction. Alright, there's a time attack mode. Okay. There's some extra costumes for Klonoa to wear, showing how his look has changed over the years. Yeah, that is actually pretty neat. None of these inclusions are bad. I just don't really think they'll matter that much to you unless you really like having new challenges placed over levels you've already mastered. So if that's you, this is a really nice perk, but personally, I really could not care less. The boss fights in the game can be fun, but I'd say that the ones in the second half of the game are way more engaging, and that goes for both versions of the game. It's your standard pattern memorization. Dodge attacks until the boss leaves themselves open, and then hit their weak point. Although there are some bosses that require you to be a bit more proactive, which are always the more fun ones. One fight that I feel a little split on is this one right here that takes place in a really critical moment of the plot. The setup is daunting, the location and situation are actually really awesome, and the music is so good, but it's also one of the shortest fights in the game and can be over incredibly quickly if you know what you're doing. If I had to point out one thing about Klonoa that strikes me as disappointing, it's that with the exception of Baloo's tower and maybe one boss fight that always seems to give me trouble for some reason, it's that the game is painfully easy. The platforming challenges might take 1 or 2 tries for you to get down, but there's only going to be a couple of places that will give you any real trouble, and these enemies are super easy to avoid. What's crazy to me is that the remake decided to go and make things even easier by giving you twice as much health, as if this already short and simple game needed to be made any easier to just breeze through. And that might be a sticking point too. This game is short. You can probably play through the whole thing in maybe 3 or 4 hours. It'll take you maybe a little longer if you really want to nail collecting all the gems or perfecting the extra modes in the Wii version, but the adventure itself doesn't last long at all, and a lot of its staying power is based on how replayable the game is. Personally, I've played through this game more times than I can count, and I honestly welcome having some shorter, more bite-sized games to enjoy, especially these days when everything has to be some grand open-world time sink. Even if I do get a lot of enjoyment from those too, I just know that's gonna be a deal breaker for a few people.
Now, with all of that being said, the game's basic structure is the same for both versions, and it succeeds in one of the most crucial possible areas, and that would be the fun factor. It's a blast to play, and that's a win in my book.
Story, gameplay, presentation, Klonoa's first outing knocks it out of the park on all fronts. The plot is easy to digest and enjoyable for people of all ages, and even manages to challenge younger players with some pretty heavy subject matter. The look and feel of the game is varied and full of life, and the game is just plain fun to play. After everything I've discussed though, including what's in the spoiler section of the review, I would have to recommend checking out the original version over the remake. The remake has some clear advantages over the original, just not in places where I think it counts most. In fact, if you have a PS3, PSP, Vita, or PS TV, this game is available for like $6 on the PSN, at least at the time of this recording, making it more accessible than the Wii version as well, which is starting to go up in price recently. Just don't get your hopes up for a physical copy of the original game. Oh man, just look at those prices. It's enough to make a grown man cry. Only reason I have a copy is, well, sheer luck, nothing else. That's really all it comes down to. Now don't get me wrong, the Wii version does still have merit, and if it's the only version you can get, it's still a great way to get into the Klonoa series. The original version is superior in my eyes, sure, but the Wii version isn't invalid as a Klonoa game or anything. In fact, I'm sure it's how a lot of people in this community first found the character, and that's a win in my book. If the Wii version's how you were introduced to Klonoa and this is the game that you love, you know what? I wouldn't want to take that away from you. I can't take that away from you, and I've never supported the like gatekeeping mentality of you're not a real fan unless you've played so-and-so version of the game. That's not who I am. I think that whole mentality reality is just silly.
Whichever version of the game you do get your hands on, I think you're gonna have a really good time. And hopefully this convinces a few people to check out the series. It can use all the help it can get right now. In the meantime though, I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to look at the handheld games in this series. And I know I'm gonna be looking at things a little out of order here, but trust me, you'll understand why later. So, until then, thank you so much for the support, everybody. I love you guys, and I'll see you next mission.
Okay, this is the part that's off script. Just gotta take a moment. Oh, it is really late at night, just finishing up everything. This is one of the last things I gotta do is record this and get it into the video. Thank you so much, each and every one of you, if you're just finding the channel, or if you've been here for a little while, whoever you are, however you found me, thanks for stopping by and watching. It means a whole lot. I put a ton of work into these videos, and especially this one. This is probably the most ambitious video I've put together since the hour-long Spider-Man review from a couple years ago. Man, this is one I've wanted to do for a while though, and the next couple of videos should be a little easier. Hoping that now I've got a pretty clear schedule. I know when I can work on stuff. I've got a brand new office. I've got all my new equipment and everything like that, and a brand new drive to get working on stuff. So let's see how this goes. Let's try to get more stuff out to each and every one of you. And a very special shout out to my top tier patrons, those being, of course, Patricia Marcoux and Christine Larkin. I love you guys so, so much. Thank you for the support that you give me, not only financially, but also just emotionally and every other way as well. Well, I guess that's all there is to say. All my info's up here on the screen, my Twitter, my social medias, my PSN account if you want to play games or something. I might put my Switch code up there at some point if you want to play Nintendo stuff. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But if you want to see more content in the future, obviously go ahead and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. Leave a comment. Let me know what I could improve on or anything like that. Or just pop in and say hi if you want to. And of course, if you want to keep updated on everything that I'm doing, Twitter is probably the social media page I use the most, and it's the best way to stay up to date on everything I'm up to. With all of that said, thank you so much, each and every one of you. The kids absolutely do say wizard. I have been Wayne, and I'll see you next mission.